I'm going to talk about how long has man actually been keeping track of the night sky, or the skies in general. All right, so early humans and the cosmos. Cosmos meaning the word order, or the world in general. So the universe seen as a well-ordered whole, which means it's a tripartite environment of sky, earth, and then where the horizon is, the underworld. Our ancestors have existed in this environment as early humans for almost 3 million years. And what we see is the fact that the environment is what is around us and what we are immersed in. And according to a recent work by the American Psychology Association, the way the brain works is that the most primitive part of our brain, the encoding, is a conscious awareness of our distance at an ambulatory scale, moving around in that environment. And that originates in the medial temporal areas of the allocortex. Now, the allocortex is the part of the brain where you find joy, such as when you smell something, it gives you that idea that it reminds you of something, or it's a pleasant experience, or maybe an epiphany you had that suddenly you had this awareness. So these encodings are conjectured to contribute to the feelings of spatial immersion and presence, which is why when we're out under the stars, we seem to be in awe, as if there's a presence to it. Yugen in Japanese means the awareness of the universe that triggers emotional responses too deep and too powerful for words. And I don't know about you, but I've experienced that, and it was life-changing for me. So now we have to decide, all right, when exactly were our brains ready for us to begin this immersion and a better understanding, of our place in the universe. So it looks like our first evolutionary change was the human diet, where we incorporated meat and marrow from large animals into our diet, which helped our brains start to grow and change. In fact, a professor at Cambridge said that it was the control of fire and cooking of food led to the creation of the modern human, and the Homo lineage was able to develop a large, complex brain due to this new diet. So tools at that time that we had were bone, wood, stone, and fire. In fact, the actual tools that we're making, using with our hands, the science of epigenetic indicates that those things like diets, tool making, the environmental factors all contributed to the human evolution of our species and our success, eventually what we consider to be early modern humans, Homo sapiens. So our evolving brain was a matter of quantitative accumulation, enabling qualitative transformation. So as we developed tools and ate a different diet over almost 3 million years, we became a lot smarter, and what Homo sapien means wise man for a very good reason. Well, so here's the Stone Age. It roughly runs from about 3 million to 3,500 BCE, before the Common Era. Now, after you get out of there, you're getting into the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, the Iron Age. But still, until about 3,500 years before the Common Era, we were still in the Stone Age, even though it might have been Neolithic. But when did we really start making tools and making expressions of art and indicating that our environment had an impact on us. We can go back almost 2 million years to a cave called Wonderworks in southern Africa. But I think that those indications of fire making may not be legitimately established yet. So let's start about 900,000 years ago with Homo erectus. Of course, then there you have the transitions between Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and eventually Homo sapiens. And as of about 100 to 210,000 years ago, our ancestors had traveled out of Africa and were migrating to a point to where about 100,000 years ago, we find fossils from that time period where a mother of a Neanderthal and a father of a Denisovan were migrating, and we came up with a indication that our ancient ancestors were in fact interbreeding. So, but as of about between 40,000, 35,000 years ago, we Homo sapiens were the only living species on our planet. Now, so you're going to think, well, okay, so prehistoric, Stone Age, how far back can we go to where we actually know people were doing observations? Well, we can move back to Africa, about 50,000 years ago. In fact, until about 1788, nothing had changed much for the Aboriginal people who arrived there with their long-standing oral traditions of their years before they even arrived. One of the stories is about the emu as part of the Milky Way. And eventually they established places like Mount Berwa in the Glass House Mountain region, where this particular rock heats up during the day, and then as the sun sets, the heat rises and separates clouds directly overhead, allowing observation of the sky. This is something that takes place even today, and apparently was so meaningful to the people of the region, the Aboriginals, that midwives would go out there and mark on a piece of bark the position of the night sky and what constellation was in the sky, and would give it to the baby so that she could pass on that tradition to her children when she became of childbearing years. Now, another researcher, Petzinger, came up with a series of caves that she said were established between 40,000 and 10,000 years ago, that same time period of Stone Age Europe. Now, a lot of the galleries of animals get all the attention, but she said she went to the places that were known about, but really don't get much research or much investigations. And over many years, her and her husband put together a list of these 28 symbols that they found over this 30,000 year range, including spirals and crosses and hash marks. And basically she said that these are the giants that the rest of us, their shoulders, we stand on today. And oh my God, sorry about that. Oh my gosh. Clicked on the wrong thing. About this time, women were recognizing that their own cycles of their bodies were coinciding with the moon. And like fire, a powerful tool you didn't need to invent, but you simply discovered and utilized. So the cyclical nature of our cosmos was becoming more evident with the way the moon is constantly with us every month. In fact, the word month comes from moon, and the root word for menstrual is menses, which means moon. And women started keeping track of this. In fact, Alexander Marshak was working for NASA in the 60s, and he was tasked with finding when were we involved in what was going on in space? And he went back and did research, and he was able to find this ivory tusk that had a sequential set of figures or symbols, and that as hard as he tried, he could not figure out why these were made until he put a time-oriented calculation to it and came up with the fact that someone had tracked the moon and marked symbols for it over a 4-month period. So we know for a fact that we were very much interested in what was going on in the sky this 50,000 years ago. Another sign is a piece of bone from France about 35 to 40,000 years ago, and it indicates the turning of the moon. These crescent engravings and markings symbolize the turning of the moon, or the waxing and waning of the moon. And again, Alexander Marshak put the time-oriented calculation to this, and it came no other meaning for what was being represented other than a lunar cycle. And about the same time, women were creating these handheld portable, like that bone I just showed you. That's something portable you take with you. These figures were portable. You take these with you as well. And you notice they're very, very full. They're accentuating the fullness of someone who has enough meat in their diet and they're healthy enough to reproduce. So the fertility aspect came into it. And again, originally antiquarians thought these were like Playboy magazines for cavemen, but turns out women were the ones that were creating these out of bone and mammoth tusks. Another famous one is the Venus of Willendorf, is 26,000 years ago approximately. Same thing, portable, meant to be taken with you and to represent the fullness of the moon. Here's another indication of about 28,000 years ago in France, where a bas-relief carving indicates that the woman is touching her belly, showing you that it is related to fertility and reproduction. And she's holding a horn in her hand, and the horn has 13 notches on it for the observational lunar year. "11,000 years ago in Spain, another series of illustrations put on a wall indicating different points of the night that the moon goes through its cycles. And the one on the right is the shape of a woman's genitalia with the moon cycles around it to indicate, to leave no doubt what we're talking about, what 11,000 years ago our ancestors were leaving behind for us. I believe it's women were the first astronomers, and I think women were the first ones to find their roots and herbs and became the first medicine people and helped us learn and educate us and nurtured us and fed us. In fact, during these times, all these caves, according to Dr. Krupp, who runs the Griffith Park Observatory, one of the masters of cultural astronomy, said that all of these caves where these indications take place, almost none of them reveal any domestic use. In fact, most of them seem to be used for some type of shamanic dimension, and that many of these caves were maybe only entered once or twice. They were not for habitation. They were set up for rites of passage to teach children about manhood and womanhood and possibly how they would survive in an environment. And so now you have the cycles of the heavens as part of the toolkit you had to survive, not just making fire and a stone axe, but you knew how to read the skies. Along with this comes about 12,000 years ago in the Levant, so the Negev and Sinai deserts, the Natufian culture started taking grain, natural wild growing grain, and started using it as part of the diet. So less and less hunter-gatherer and more much agrarian. And this is one of the first indications that they were thinking about themselves and making human examples of their place in the environment. And again, this is 12,000 years ago. Also in those same deserts, they were building stone circles. These standing stones, in Hebrew, mazabah, were actually setting up a way of keeping track because it wasn't desert 12,000 years ago, 11,000 years ago. It was land that was green and abundant and ripe for agriculture. They would set up stone circles with a man and a woman, a tall and a short stone, oriented to the rising sun. And at the same time, they were building a Gobekli Tepe, another temple, not just for our ancestors to give them homage who came before that enabled them to survive and thrive, but is a good possibility that these stone structures were set up in a way that, like a spokes of a wheel, like Stonehenge, were pointing to places on the horizon so that the sky, the earth, and the underworld were being joined together in the minds. And Vladimir, in the Russian Academy of Science, believes that he has, using the precession, the equinox, figured out approximately when this was built and how it was oriented. Now, this is still work in progress, but he indicates that there's a lot of different subject matter that can be explored, and that he's been showing that there are relative alignments. Now, of course, you know, in the field of cultural astronomy, you have to really work hard to prove what's purposeful alignments and what's accidental or coincidental alignments, which is something most sites you have to go through and investigate. So again, just like the fire making of 1.8 million years ago in Africa, this is something that is still going on. We're still researching with that. Catalhoyuk, another place about 8,000 years ago in the same region, building apartment complexes, civilization. Now we're not just living in front of caves, but we're actually building apartment buildings. But yet we still keep the Venus figure, that the inheritor, the ruler with her panthers on each side, the nature of the land and the people, the fauna and flora, and women were all connected. And bullhorns were something very important to the people of this time. And they actually created these scenes to show you that there was no doubt that they were connected to the heavens as well as what was happening in their new emerging agrarian societies. Now, about 6,500 years ago, the Sumerian and Babylonian people created a huge empire that lasted for thousands of years in what's the Mesopotamian land between two rivers, what we call the Fertile Crescent. And that includes all these areas that I just showed you. And by about 3,800, 3,500 BCE, ziggurats were popping up everywhere. People were, the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Sumerians were giving homage to and observing the moon. The Sumerians had their gods, On, the ruler of the sky and heaven, Utu, the son of the god, and Nan, the god of the moon. All of these were still in the Stone Age. At this time, human kings began an official and formal relationship with the gods, planets were now be considered messengers because they moved independently in front of a fixed field of stars. And Hebrews called them a walking star, a kakav, or a planet. In Hebrew, a malach meant a messenger. But that because they seem to be speaking to us because they didn't act like the other stars. And the sun was seen to be powered by a deity as it flew across the sky. And it was seen that some of the constellations seemed to be interacting with each other. In fact, the famous story of Enkidu and Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, they had a famous story about how the gods sent Enki to teach Gilgamesh to be a better king. And they became really, really good friends. But eventually Enkidu died and Gilgamesh goes on a quest to the underworld for the plant of the heartbeat, the plant of immortality. And you can see the story written in the stars. Gilgamesh is being Orion, going down the river of Eridanus into the underworld. And to him, where he's pointing his bow, is Taurus, also the horned deity Enkidu. But at this time, writing was first invented as we know it today. Sure, it began as symbols on the left, and then you see on the right, it developed into what we call cuneiform. But still, all of these oral traditions were a part of what they told for tens of thousands of years before anybody thought to start writing them down. They were just accepted within each culture. Of course, now they also decided that it's good to know how many cattle you have, and when someone made standard copper or something for you, you wanted to write them a letter and saying you were displeased to send you another shipment. So that's mostly what cuneiform was used by the Sumerians. But they did start making symbols to write down their oral traditions. And here is an example of On. As you can see, about 3,000 years before the Common Era, it was a shape of a star and eventually developed into the symbol of a cross as the God or the universe itself was On. And so now you have the sun and the moon, the 5 visible planets in the sky. Now 7's a number considered to be lucky, and if it is lucky, it's simply because those 5 planets and the sun and the moon were considered to be divine, and the good luck comes from the divinity. Just like the phrase Mazel Tov in Hebrew means good constellations, and specifically zodiacal constellations, where that luck comes from. And so now you have like the bull of heaven fighting against a hero, and then it moved on to actually more astronomical observations and tracking of the skies. And by the 3rd dynasty of the Sumerian Ur, Babylonians began emerging as the leaders of the cosmic narrative. And again, now they have a portable sky chart you can take with you. The zodiac is developed. The Babylonians have a measurement based on 60, where like the Mayans had a 20 base of vigesimal. This was 60 and established 360 degrees around the horizon and gave them 60 seconds in a minute. And they had a world of the heavens above, the earth, and then the underworld below, as far back as 1800 BCE. Now, even though this might be Neolithic, it's still the Stone Age. But let's go to Egypt. 6400 and 9400 before the Common Era. At Nabta Playa, they set up stones to designate themselves to what they consider to be a very important constellation of Orion. And their mythology and oral traditions that would lead to the establishment along the Nile, so much further north, to where the great stone temples aligned to cardinal directions were anchored to the northern and southern skies. So these stone pyramids were set up for one purpose and one purpose only: to allow the half man, half God to ascend to the heavens. Sure, they were tombs, but they were really vehicles for ascension. That's the purpose of them. And in the south, they were set up to be oriented to Canis Major and Osiris or Orion, so that way the pharaoh could take his place among the stars as Orion. And in the north, they were set up as circumpolar constellations, and important because since the circumpolar constellations don't touch the horizon, they're not impure. They can't be tainted. That purity is where the power is, and therefore the north side of the pyramids were set up to those circumpolar constellations. And to the east was the Sphinx. The Sphinx was the guardian of the horizon, where all the doors or the gates, the planets, and celestial activity was taking place on the horizon that went through, and he was the guardian between the equinox and the solstices. Now, 5000 BCE, the people out of the Fertile Crescent and Anatolia, where Catalhoyuk and those other sites were set up, eventually migrated west until they couldn't go any further west, and they ended up on the coast of Ireland and England and France. Karnak has been around in the state, you see it right here, for 7,000 years. And it's oriented to the solstices. These long rows of parallel standing stones, these menhirs, were also surrounded by mounds and dolmens and other formations of prehistoric structures, probably having to do with not only the seasonal activities of a person's culture, but the dead. Just like the other structures you saw, like Catalhoyuk and other sites, have to do with honoring the dead. Now here in Karnak, we also have menhirs, or just simple standing stones. But as you can see, some of these are quite large and are oriented to the skies. And there's probably about 50,000 megaliths in these areas, and a lot of them we're still finding and discovering that have been buried by time. Now, up in France, this particular passage grave is from the Neolithic. As you can see on the walls, these standing stones holding the ceiling up have spirals on them in different ways to show activity, and it's believed that these are celestial in nature. And as you can see, this passage stone entrance is quite large, and that only at certain times of the year does light enter these passages. Here again, spirals on the walls. And another one, this is 3,500 years BCE. Another one comes just north of that in Newgrange, a couple thousand years later. This is the largest passage tomb and mound in the area, and it predates Stonehenge and the pyramids. And it basically, again, only gets light one day a year, and that's on the morning of the winter solstice, where a beam of light created by above the doorway shoots down between the megalithic structures and lands in the back of where the chieftain and his family are buried. So that one day a year, that they are renewed by the sun. It's not just a promise of spring to come, but it's a sense, a way of connecting yourself to immortality. And so did our ancestors who built Stonehenge. And this is where we start transitioning from the Neolithic period to the Bronze Age to the Copper Age. And tools are now, and metalworking was becoming something more common than it was a rarity. And we were really making sure that this was part of our culture, and migrations were held, and like Ramadan or other celebrations, the Hajj, you would go to a place where, like the meteor that landed, it's called the Kaaba stone at the center of Mecca. Everybody goes around it 7 times, counterclockwise, as they point to that object that fell out of the sky. This is who we are. And humans are still drawn to that tripartite environment at the solstice and the equinox. In fact, today, it's even more popular to go to Stonehenge for the solstices. But here in the communication age and the information age, some want to install huge orbiting billboards and tens of thousands of reflective communication satellites, and further destroying the night sky and our shared celestial inheritance. So what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to sit by and let them destroy the sun? Are we going to let them put up in a church next to the crucifixion the cross saying, Jesus brought to you by Coca-Cola? I don't think people are going to go for that. But they really don't understand how sacred the night sky is. But that's why we're here. And we'll teach them. So the conclusion is that early modern humans were indeed making naked eye observations and tracking the cyclical nature of a tripartite environment for at least 50,000 years. And this discovered tool enabled us to thrive as humans and survive the all other humans. And beyond all those other humans, we're still here today. And naked eye observations, just so you know, the telescope wasn't invented until 600 years ago. So we've been doing naked eye observation for, pretty much forever. So let's make that part of our experience as well. Okay, that's my preachy lecture. Thank you very much for listening. And no responses. Any questions?
No, thank you very much, Seven. That was a very, very interesting and educational thing. One question I would have for you too. So, your presentation is definitely best based on what we would call, I guess, your Western culture, Europe, north parts of Africa, a little bit of the Middle East too. What's happening though in Asia at this time? What's happening in China and India? Do they have parallel developments that come in? Have they been very well studied? It seems to me that's a very interesting area.
Not till later. Okay, basically all of those areas didn't have much recording of anything in the Stone Age. This is Stone Age. So yeah, I looked that up last time I did this because someone asked a similar question, and I looked it up, and there was observations going on, but nothing that we can point to until the emerging Asian cultures. And so I really can't find anything going back, 5,000 years ago to the Asians or other parts of the world. Yes, it's mostly Western culture, but that's all I've been able to find. Not to say it doesn't exist, but I can't find any record of it.
And you think that was due to a lack of writing in Asia?
No, I just don't think that we have found the evidence yet, because I think we've only scratched the surface of what we know about our existence on this planet. And through archaeology and anthropology, paleontology, we're still just scratching the surface.
On the map you showed of the continent, several slides after this, I guess this is your first slide, which showed that people had gotten to Ireland and whatnot several centuries before they'd gotten to the interior of Europe. Do we have any indication of how it is that they got that far and how they bypassed everything in the way? Did they go by sea or?
Well, that's still being debated, whether it's here in the Americas or whether it's the migrations out of Africa. All of those numbers are being pushed back all the time. Homo sapiens in Europe. Oh, we just found out something recently that pushed it back 150,000 years. We found out that migratory patterns didn't happen exactly the way we thought. They not only went in different waves, but they went out of different places after they've been established again, such as going across the Bering Strait. People would go there, and before they crossed over, they would establish a culture there, and over tens of thousands of years, they would develop people and generations, and then their children and their children's children would then continue the migrations further. So the DNA is really helping us start to truly understand how that happened, but it's also showing us how much we really don't know and how further back all the time the timeline of our place as Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and other species have been existing. We're now finding out that Neanderthals were not just one species, that there were different types of Neanderthals. This is a recent discovery we just found. So all of these questions are still being answered. I hope that's vague enough for you.
Hello, Seven. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this presentation. Drew, are you the one in charge of these slides? Can you put the group of attendees back on so that we can have a conversation? I'd appreciate it. Well, one of the things that, Seven, that you spoke about is that understanding cultural astronomy really is a work in progress. And it's that mystery, I think, that I find particularly fascinating. In the world we live in today, science often presents itself, and I don't think intentionally, because I know a lot of scientists have a great sense of appreciating the mysterious. But once you know where the constellation Orion is, and once you know that astronauts flew to the moon at 17,000 miles an hour, you've got a full understanding, and science puts everything in a neat, tidy box. But what your presentation really was about for me is this sense of wonder and appreciation of the mysterious cosmos that we live in the middle of. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to show that the night sky, the cyclical nature of our cosmos, is a part of who we are. It's in our DNA.
Yes, and when you talked about the three-part cosmos that Neolithic and Paleolithic people observed, hey, it's still here. The heavens above, the earth that we walk on, and then this underworld that we, in many cultures, emerged from, and of course we all return to at death.
Yes, well said.
Other questions? If not, then we thank you again for that most interesting and educational presentation.